Hello, welcome back to the David Watson podcast. Today I spoke with Dan and we spoke about seasonal affective disorder, SAD, a depression caused by those who don't spend enough time in the sun. But it's more complicated than that. These things always are more complicated than that. And Dan was generous enough to share his experience and tell us about the children's book he's written called Sam. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Hello, welcome to the David Watson podcast. Very nice to meet you. And how are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm doing very good. The sun is shining and it's a beautiful day. So yeah, I'm doing very good.
Which would be quite pertinent, the sun shining, for the topic of today's podcast. It's why don't you explain to people?
I would love to. So what we're going to be talking about is seasonal affective disorder, also known as SAD. And SAD comes on during the winter months and is worse during January and February. And so what it is it's depression that comes on because of lack of sunlight, which is from lack of vitamin D because the sun is not showing as much. So people get depressed during that time, and it is 5% of the population. And in America, it's 22 million people that suffer.
Yeah, it's quite common. Well, I don't know how common it is. It's well known in the UK that when we shift into the winter months, we have a lot of people in the UK that suffer from SAD.
I totally believe that. Yeah. I mean, you guys it's raining all the time.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, literally, it does rain a lot. But yeah.
One of my favorite groups is the Lightning Seeds, and they talk about the rain all the time. So I'm sure.
Yeah, we are. So yeah, so the reason the British are so obsessed with the weather is we don't have a constant. So you could literally go out this morning and it will be sunny, and in 2 hours from now you could be in a rainstorm, and then it could be sunny again. Or
that's ironic. That's kind of the same where the state I live.
I think we're similar.
About if you like the weather, it'll change. If you don't like the weather, it'll change.
Yeah, it's a bit like that. And the only thing we have is around sort of autumn, winter, and spring. It literally can just rain in some form for 8 weeks. Wow. It will never stop. And that could be drizzle, it could be hard rain. It's just constantly wet. And after a while, it just seems to get into everything. And it does. SAD is very common in the UK for those reasons.
Gotcha.
You know, even for people who work outdoors. So how did you sort of kind of get into it, discover it, become sort of an advocate for it?
Well, I personally have SAD, and so during COVID, I went through the worst possible, lowest time of my life, and when I did, instead of choosing to do what my negative thoughts wanted me to do, I took all those emotions and I wrote a book.
Yeah.
Let me show you the book.
Yeah, of course.
It's called Why Is Sam So Sad? And I'm also wearing the shirt for it. Check it out.
We'll make sure
there he is.
We'll make sure there's links for all the merchandise.
So, and the other thing is, when Sam's happy, it's sunny out.
Yeah.
And like you said, in England, when it's dark and cloudy, or in my case, more winter, he feels sad.
Yeah, I like that.
But since I'm doing the interview, I'd rather be happy.
Yeah. So for those people that are listening, Dan has a reversible hat with a smiling Sam or a sad Sam, depending on the mood. It's very good. I like that. I like that.
Thank you.
So you've been very creative.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
Yeah, but you've been very creative with all of this.
Can you say that again?
I said you've been very creative.
Thank you.
With all of this, because I think there's a bit of a time delay between.
Yeah, there's a little bit. It's okay though. We're good.
Yeah, because it's incredibly visual, and it's immediate when you see it what it means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a friend of mine makes shirts, and like you said, the creativity was like, oh, why don't I do a hat and a reverse? And I didn't even know that they made reversible hats. I looked online, all of a sudden reversible hats. I'm like, perfect. This is exactly what I want. And on the first page of my book, he talks about that. He talks about when he is charged and when he's not charged. And I'm talking about Sam, who is my character in the book. I apologize. So there's the page in the book. Can you see that?
Yeah,
Am I
yeah.
doing okay?
Yeah, with the battery
All right.
symbols.
Yeah, so the battery symbols, and plus you can also see that he's vivid and bright colors when he's happy,
Yeah.
and the battery's up high. And then when he's down low, it's gray and barely any color. So that's kind of how things are for him.
Yeah.
And he talks about when he's happy and sad. And surprisingly, one of my coworkers, I told him about this, and his kid actually said, "Yeah, Dad, I didn't feel charged yesterday." And then another day he's like, "Dad, I totally felt charged." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's so cool that my book related to him." And he's only in preschool. So I was blown away.
What age would preschool be?
Well, that is a good question because I did preschool forever. Within my 15 years of teaching, it is somewhere between age 3 to 5.
Okay. Because the symbols of the battery is very relatable nowadays because
Yeah.
because of the technology that we use with smartphones and tablets. So it's I can
Oh, totally. I didn't think about that.
so it's like you can see why it's so relatable that everybody understands what that means, which is great when you're trying to communicate with a child because you want them to be the ones that can help you navigate how they're feeling.
Oh, very true.
You mentioned you had it really bad in lockdowns and for COVID.
Yeah.
Did you know you had it before then?
Oh, yeah. I've had it all my life. But the thing is that it was not diagnosed when I was younger. What happened is, what is it? Norman E. Rosenthal created it. Well, he coined the term SAD, seasonal affective disorder, and then he decided and he gave it, what happens is that we are lacking sun at this point, and that the melatonin is overpowering and at the time, and the melatonin is what makes us sleepy and dark at night. And so what happens is the serotonin is what makes it happy and sunny. And so during that time of the darkest days, it's actually the longest day and the darkest day is January 1st. I put that on my website, and actually my author, and there's a YouTube about things that I would do and remedies for that. One of the remedies for that would be vitamin D and light therapy. And I personally take St. John's wort. So when I was younger, my mom didn't really want to give us much medicine. And so I could always take St. John's wort. However, some people don't necessarily believe that that is effective. I read something about, in France that they didn't believe it's effective, but I've never stopped taking it because I still believe that it works for me. And then vitamin D, of course, because we're lacking vitamin D from the sun.
I've just started upping my vitamin D. I was listening to somebody the other day who takes massive amounts of vitamin D. And he said because he believes, and I'm just trying it to see if I notice a difference, but he believes that when he upped his vitamin D, it improved his life. And he takes, and I'm not suggesting anybody does this, but he takes about 3 to 4 times the recommended daily dose.
Wow. Well, I can tell you this: when I know that SAD's coming on, I try to boost it, and so I take more than I need to that very first initial time. And then as the months go on, I take less and less when it gets sunny and sunnier. And then obviously when it's totally sunny, I don't need it at all for winter sad. But there is something that's called summer sad if you wanted to
I did
ask
not.
about that too.
I do now because I've never heard of
I
that.
know I didn't know about it until researching it either. I wrote the book and I'm just like, wow, I could have put this in there too. So summer sad, as opposed to winter sad. Winter sad, what you want to kind of think about is maybe like a bear hibernating. So what they do is they get more starchy foods, they sleep in longer, and they try to just contain they they overeat and things like that. So that's what a bear would do in hibernation, which Normandy Rosenthal he um, he actually talked about that with that's kind of like a good way to think about it. On the other hand, with SAD in the summer, which is only 10% of the population of SAD, the other 90% have the winter SAD. So the summer SAD is kind of more irritable, and they deal with aggravation and possibly violence. So the way I see it is, and insomnia. So they're not really getting relaxed at night.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like I see it, they can't be relaxed but a lot of things there's a lot going on. So what the best thing you want to do for that is just basically calm down, it's coming, try to plan for it as much as you can, and just deal with it that way. Of course, for both SADs, you can, go into some kind of therapy, talk to a doctor. There is CBT. I think that's what it's called. I can't remember what it is
Cognitive
right
behavior
now.
therapy.
Yeah, that's it. So what that is you go through the problem while you're dealing with it, but little by little, kind of like if you're afraid of spiders, well, you look at a picture of a spider. Okay,
Yeah.
that's the first step. Then you would watch a movie about, a very quick clip about a spider. And then, you'd actually later on, you'd actually see a spider and you maybe touch it or whatever you would do. And then therefore you become more accustomed to it. Of course, that's for both SAD.
It reminds me, I think I must have been a child or a teenager. I'm sure it was, and I'm 50 this year, so I'm sure it's nearly 30, 40 years ago. I remember one of those, like regional news programs where they're discussing something. Now, that was the first time I'd ever heard of SAD. And I'm sure it was as long ago as that. And there was this husband and wife who lived in this cottage. And they had this wonderful view of a hill. And they were talking about SAD because every year towards the end of the summer, the sun would never rise above the hill again until the spring.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they used to notice, and they were talking about how this mood. So they might not see the sun for 3 or 4 months because they basically lived in the shadow of this hill. And and I don't know why, but I've never forgotten that program. I don't know why it's so entrenched in my mind, because I must have only been about 10 years old when I watched it.
Oh yeah, I get it.
How much do you think it could be connected to modern living?
Well, they do say, one of the things that we do need to do is get outside more. The more we can get outside, the more we can actually, pardon me, the more we can get outside, the more we can, be with nature and, get the sun and things like that. And because we're in front of the computers so much, we don't get outside and we don't exercise as much as we used to. And this is big time with exercising. Obviously, same kind of things you talk about: normal health, diet, best diet, healthy diet, and healthy diet, exercise as much as you can. But with this one, it's more vitamin D is the thing to do. For summer SAD, it's just trying to remain calm and plan things so that, and you don't take under too much stress.
Yeah. What guided you to write it as a children's book?
Well, like I said, I have 15 years of teaching, and the majority of it was preschool. And I've always kind of seen myself as a Peter Pan kind of guy,
Yeah.
which is I have that ability to communicate with kids. I have that ability to be that creative and kind of playful. And um, it's kind of funny for me to be like doing this because as an adult, I would, it was felt always weird being an adult genes, I guess you can say. Um, but I would love to. I've always been a big reader. In fact, when I was, dealing with SAD, when I was younger, because I couldn't fall asleep, I would read all the time. And so I would read and try to get good thoughts in my head, and as long as I had good thoughts in my head, I would be able to, fall asleep, and I would think about that, well, as much as I could. But for me, when I dealt with SAD, it was not moving around much. And and I talk about Sam, and he talks about being in his bed and not caring about things. He calls it his don't care feeling. And that's kind of with me. And he talked about being up at
Yeah.
night. That's another thing that happens with, can you see that?
Yeah.
That's another thing that happens with, summer SAD, is that they talk about insomnia versus extra sleeping. I know I'm bouncing around, but there's a
No,
lot
that's
to
okay.
talk about.
Yeah. No. That's absolutely fine. Because it's important, isn't it? Because if there's somebody, I mean, we would hope that if there's somebody out there who's having a really bad time with this, or
Mm-hmm.
is having a really bad time and thinks there's more to it, that we would hope they would be able to find a video like this on YouTube or the audio on Spotify or iTunes or something, and actually be of benefit to them. Because I'm sure you'll be able to tell us there are, along with vitamin D and exercise and going out, you mentioned a few times about how you focus on the way you're thinking. So you've obviously
Totally.
come up with strategies and methods when you realize it's happening to say, okay, there's a method out of this.
Right. Well, I don't trust my thoughts at night. Oh, well, I don't trust my thoughts at night, because they're negative,
Yeah.
straight up negative, and I don't trust them. So during this time at night, I don't make decisions at night because I don't trust them. And as long as I know, and I go in and I'm saying, okay, don't listen to them. There's a good video from Hal Elron, I believe. It's on impact theory, and he talks about dealing with. He had a crazy life, and he goes through dealt with cancer, and he has, when he's like, I think it was 17, he had this huge car accident, and people are like, how can you be okay with your life? And he gives himself 5 minutes, 5 minutes to go through it, to go through anger, guilt, mad, whatever it is. After those 5 minutes, back to reality. And I kind of do the same thing. I remind myself, nope, you got 5 minutes, or if you are ready to sleep in and trying to, oh, I don't want to get up. Okay, fine. Just go. You got your 5 minutes, back to reality.
It's interesting you say, because there's something I do when I'm coaching people where I talk to them, and it's a way of overcoming procrastination, but it applies here as well, that if you know you have to do something, set a time. Rather
Totally.
than I've got to do this, I've got to do that. It's like, no, not everybody is that disciplined, and you've kind of got to understand what enables you to get your ass out of bed, or get yourself downstairs or whatever. And sometimes it's just saying, do you know what? I will scroll on my phone for half an hour. But at 10 o'clock,
Yeah.
I'm getting dressed. I'm getting up at 10 o'clock, having a shower, getting dressed and going downstairs and having a cup of coffee. And then by 11, I'm going to go to the shops. I'm going to go for that walk, whatever. And I just tell people to frame it with time. And in between that, you don't have to do something. So if you're finished everything in your morning routine by 20 to 11 and you're not going out until 11, or you weren't going for a walk until 11 or going to the gym until 11, still don't. Enjoy that 20 minutes of doing nothing. Scroll on your phone, read the newspaper, don't do anything, and just stick to those little segments where your brain is like, okay, at this moment we're going to do this, because your brain will function like that. If you don't like things if you like to be organized, you want to create an organization that your brain can associate itself to, rather than trying to be erratic, because that might be what's causing you so many problems.
Yeah, that's true. One of the things that I noticed during COVID when I was trying to, deal with my life and everything, I found a really cool video. It's by, I believe it was Anthony Medver, and I'm probably slaughtering the name. I apologize, but there are there's two phrases that can kill any negative thought. Now, granted, I say them and it kills the thought, and the negativity is still going to rise. So you have to say it a couple of times. And the first time I was practicing, and I probably said it like 20 or 30 times, because it's like, is this even working? So the two negative thoughts, or the two phrases that kill any negativity, are, what are your thoughts and how are they behaving? And surprisingly, it actually works. That brings me back to reality. When you're going down that negative path, you feel your body sulking. You feel you in your mind, you just don't do well and with negativity. And so I just remind myself, hey, this is not me talking. This is not my thoughts. This is not Dan Granger's thoughts, the author thoughts. So this is sad talking. This is sad in control. And so I say those things. I say, how are my thoughts? Or what are my thoughts? And how are they behaving? And I'm back to reality.
The latter phrase, how are they behaving? I like that. Because that
yeah, me too.
There's almost a judgment, as if they're not you. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, they're not your thoughts. How are they behaving? And yeah, I don't know why. As soon as you said that almost rewired something in my head about how to deal with my own.
Works.
Yeah. But it's just like,
yeah.
I've never thought about it like that. How are my thoughts behaving?
Me neither. Totally.
Because it's the way you were talking about. You said the negative thoughts at night. So it's almost, and this might sound a bit clumsy, and I apologize if it does. It's almost like there's a relationship going on.
You're good.
Does that make sense? Because you talk about them in a way that you're living with them. You're living with them as more than they are you, if that makes sense.
Well, I don't want them to be part of me. So yeah, I would live with them. Actually, surprisingly, I know when my mom was like, we need to get you meds. And I'm like, I don't like that. I don't like meds. What meds do is they give you a flat affect. And because I've dealt with it all my life, I'm like, okay, well, I don't like this feeling. I can't have a high feeling when I'm on meds. But again, this is just me. I'm not prescribing anything against medication or anything like that. But I know my mom and I used to fight with that all the time. And my one thing that I love, and it's so rare, completely rare, but there's this like euphoria and like a full body euphoria that you just get. And every now and then, even with, it's so rare, but your whole body is just like so excited and so happy. And it happens, maybe once or twice a winter, or maybe less than that. I don't even know. I've never like tracked it or anything like that. And when I, was on the meds, I never felt that way. I just felt flat, and I didn't feel my feelings. I mean, granted, I have to deal with this, and it's, I don't feel good and my thoughts are not good, but I just tell myself, no, those aren't your thoughts. They're, those are sad. They're not your thoughts.
It's interesting though, because in a funny way, you've kind of created a very upbeat way of dealing with it.
I missed what you said. Like,
Sorry, I was saying that in a strange way, in a funny way, you've kind of created a very upbeat way of dealing with it.
oh yeah, totally.
You know,
I mean, what's the crazy thing is how far I've gone in this author journey, and what if you would have seen me during COVID, I I was lying to my friends and my family. I was planning on taking my life. That was my goal. What happened is I created this book, but there's another thing that happened. My best friend, I went on a journey with him to give my kidney. And I figured I don't need it where I'm going.
yeah,
I'm leaving this world. So I'll do some good before I do that. And normally, if you give a donation for a kidney, it's 6 months. My donation lasts a year and a half, and I wasn't even the one who gave it to him. Surprisingly, it all turns out okay. My best friend, and like I said, my very best friend, I've known him since junior high. He actually has a kidney now. It wasn't from me. I both my kidneys, and it just this wasn't my path. This author thing was my path, but these two things brought me out of the depression, which I'm, he, because I was in it and dealing with it and fighting with it, I didn't see it for what he said it is. When when I went to visit him in the bed in his, recovery bed in the hospital, he said, "It's amazing what you did. You, instead of leaving this world, you somehow were able to create something, and you did that, and that's a miracle." And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that, what? No, because I didn't see it that way, because I was fighting through it. And, now that it's kind of over with and my friend does have a kidney, I do see it as a miracle. I created a book. That was never my intention. I mean, everybody in life is like, oh, sometime I'm going to write a book or I'm going to do this. I had no idea, but I took all my emotions and created the book. And, I'm just, I'm totally on a different journey. This is crazy. I love it.
do you think it gave you a purpose?
A purpose? Oh, yes. If I didn't have this book and I didn't have the kidney, and I didn't have the journey with a kidney, I would not be here. If I didn't write this book, it wouldn't, if I would have been passed away, this book would never have been written. And, going through all that depression and, lying to my family, which basically the lying part was just basically agreeing with them, yeah, blah, blah, blah. But I know how I'm planning it and I know what I'm going to do after I give my kidney away, because I don't need it. And, all my friends supported me, and they had an inkling, but not really. When I wanted to go I lived in Arizona for the last, what, 18 years or something like that. And then I came back to Wisconsin, and that's where I grew up, and that's where I had SAD. Now, when we're in Arizona, it's sunny all the time, and I didn't have it at all. So when I came back to Arizona, it's kind of like it was like the enemy smiles and is cackling away and be like, haha, I remember where you were. Now it's going to be worse for you because you just came back. And it seemed like it was double or even, triple what I remember. And that's, COVID hit, and, you couldn't move around, you couldn't get outside as much. And where I work was the real key, the real catalyst. So where I work, I had 14 hours, I believe, and 14 hours of work, and I never saw the sun in the first 2 years of COVID. I was at work before the sun rose, and I was back by, I got out of work after it already set.
Hard, isn't it? That's That's a real tough one. That's
Yeah, it's a lot of information for you.
no, but it's important, isn't it? Because people don't always understand how we can all be going through similar things.
Very true.
I find when bouts of depression come in, there's an isolation where you think it's only you, and
Yep.
sometimes it doesn't help, but sometimes it does help if you realize someone else is going through the same, especially if they kind of talk about the good and the bad days, as you know,
Hmm.
because it kind of turns it into a process where you enable yourself to look forward and like, oh, actually, maybe tomorrow I can be a bit better, because there's been times in my life when I have been better. And I find sometimes with depression and stuff, in the moment you forget that there's been more to your life than just the last few days or the last couple of weeks, and it can be very hard to get yourself out of that kind of shadow.
Right. In what you're saying, that's one of the things I remember is this is a short time. Yes, it's coming up, and during when it comes up, you only have to do this for so many months. And what with your depression, like you said, you just want to deal with it a little bit. Um, I read a book recently called The Power of One More, and basically it talks about, I apologize, I can't remember who wrote it. I found it on YouTube that he was being interviewed, and he talked about his dad, and his dad was an alcoholic, and he's like, can you quit? Can you do it? And he's like, every day is a struggle, but I just need to get that one more day, and every day, one more day he's sober, one more day he's sober. And you just kind of go over small increments. So yeah, I agree with that, you just need to keep it in check,
Yeah, I just
I guess
quickly
is the
looked
best
that
way to
up.
describe it.
I just quickly looked that up. It was Ed Milet.
Yeah. And it's yeah,
When going back to the book,
sure.
there's before you wrote the book, what
Yep.
was what was kind of the catalyst or maybe the seed that made you start thinking that there was a creative process that could happen with what was going on?
So the job that I do does not keep my mind active. We'll put it that way. So I've always had the wandering mind. I used to daydream in school, get called out on that, even in, like second grade and stuff like that. So here I am, and my mind's not necessarily active as much as it should be. And during the time that I'm working, my mind is just thinking, thinking, thinking. And yeah, I kind of thought about all these bad things that are happening. And um, I work at a factory, and it's an artificial lighting, which is horrible for, you don't need that. And you can imagine the 14 hours of artificial lighting. And it was 7 days a week. So Monday through Sunday. And just during those 2 years, it was horrible. And every day I would, barely get up and do my thing. And um, so I had little sticky notes, and I'd write down something like, oh, I got to make sure I add this to Sam, and oh, I got to make sure I add this to him. And I'd always wanted to write a book, and in fact I was writing a book, and I put this book on hold because I needed to write this book. This was a calling to write this book, and it's been incredible since I've written this book. I never in a million years would have seen myself as an expert to doing something. I mean, obviously, as a teacher, you are the expert at what you do, but to be actually called by numerous people, like, what is your story, is incredible. and yeah, so I wrote this book and I love it. And the thing is, Sam is me and I am Sam. So it's just it definitely is a thing to me. I mean, I think about Sam all the time. Well, not think about him all the time, but if I talk about him, I definitely it's definitely a labor of love.
So, so Sam is Sam a part of you that existed as a child? Are you kind of writing a little bit about your inner child, or it, go?
Yeah. There's a couple yeah, I mean, I used to not be able to sleep, so I talk about that. I talk about lack of having friends and pushing my friends away. And that's the thing that we need to know, that people need to know about SAD, is you're pushing friends away, you're pushing family away, and people don't understand why. Why, if you were dealing with a new friend, you were trying to make a new friend and they don't know that you have this, you push them away. They're like, okay, well, not going to worry about that friend. However, my friends know that I go through this and I push them away. I literally push them away. Like, no, I'm not going to do that.
But what I
And I have a
mean,
couple pictures that,
you go.
sorry. So here's another picture. Do you see Sam in the window?
Yep, yep, yeah,
So his friends are asking him, "Do you want to play today?" And he's
yeah.
like, "No." And
Hold it up a bit higher.
surprisingly, even
Hold it up a bit. That's it. Perfect. Yeah.
so he's
It does look
even
cold
if you
outside,
can
though.
see
To
in
be
his
fair.
yeah, it is, but you can see in his eyes that he's actually mad at them, which it's surprising. I wanted him to be,
Yeah,
irritated, but it
yeah.
just kind of comes to cross. I love that.
Who did the illustrations?
This is from sorry, it's just from Christian Faith Publishing.
Yep.
And yeah, a friend of mine, the way that that book started was I was at work and I'm like, yeah, I want to write a book. And I talked to a coworker, and I barely even knew the coworker. And they're like, oh yeah, a friend of mine made a book. And we went with this publishing. I'm like, give her a call. And so I made a call to a stranger and asked her about like how it goes. And we had a really, really, really good conversation. And she told me about what she uses and it went from there. And I've just learned so much on this journey.
I just want to go back
And
to. Go on.
go ahead. No, if you're good.
I was just going to say, I want to go back. I'm just trying to join some dots up in my own head about Sam and the connection to who Sam is. And
Sure.
I might need some time to explain this. So there's a bit of me. So this is the David Watson podcast. But the David Watson podcast isn't, I'm not anybody that my friends, isn't somebody that my friends know. Right? Do you know what I mean? Because this is a kind of an alter ego that I share with people that I've never actually met before. And
Okay.
do you know when you see it in like Disney films or like people talk about kids and their imaginary friends, right? So you have young children and they have an imaginary friend, right? I'm not saying that Sam is your imaginary friend. I think we've got a bad
Okay.
internet. All right.
Yeah,
Is
you
it?
do, but that's okay.
Yeah. If Sam was a child, is it possible that you're his imaginary friend, sort of thing? I'm trying to understand who Sam is.
Wow, that's possibly the toughest question I've ever answered. I, I know I would be friends with Sam. I mean, because what myself, I've always been big with the underdogs because well, the reason I went into teaching is because I actually have um, grew up with special ed. I'm learning disabled, and so I've always been a champion of the underdog. So I think this is kind of the same thing. Is that he is an underdog, and if you read the book, he talks about resilience. He talks about all these things that he could and not giving up. And he's one day he's not sleeping, or in one page he's not sleeping. Another he talks about the teenagers, and teenagers go through either overeating or undereating. Like for summer sad, which is also called reverse sad, they go through lack of eating. And I myself went through a lack of eating, but
Yeah.
that's always been me. Um, so I don't, it's not he's not an imaginary character that I created. Um, but I definitely, when I created the book, I was just like, well, what have I gone through? And all the experiences I went through, I just wrote them down as a kid book. And because I've known, as a teacher, I've probably read, well, I know in my library, I probably have like 300 books, but I've probably read so many. And I know how much reading a book can affect a child or students or whatever as a teacher, and, as a parent, the same thing. You sit down and you have you have your story time, and they can be affected by it, and, they can relate to the story. And I've had a lot of people that can relate to this.
Yeah, because it's when you're talking about Sam, you're talking
Yeah.
about him in the first person as easy as if he is as if he is actually a person and not a character in the book. And so many years ago, I wrote a book on reincarnation called 22 Flaws, and it was about a person
Okay.
who committed suicide and how his soul would reincarnate. And I was effectively offloading into a book about my own experiences of thinking and contemplating and killing myself. And it was, and a lot of the stories in there are real life events that I just tweaked a little bit so that it's not so obvious who I'm talking about or what I'm talking about. But some of those characters are real people. And the main character, a guy called Michael, who killed himself, I'm really just exploring what would have happened if I'd done it. And
Oh,
right, so
okay. Yeah.
what I'm wondering is what part of you is actually Sam, because does Sam in some capacity actually exist in reality? And he's not a character on a book. He's maybe the adult version of you or the child version of you expressing himself through a character.
That's a tough one. Yeah, I guess as a child, growing up, I guess that, like I said, I've taken all my experiences.
Hmm.
And, I wish I could there's one page one of my favorite pages, um, and talks about how Sam wishes he could go somewhere else when it's warmer, where it's warmer as opposed to, oh, so I also, during Christmas time, I didn't like Christmas, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I went through two different phases during Christmas. I went through the phase of enjoying all the things that happened, the celebration and that stuff like that. But because it was off of uh, school and this off of a regimented schedule, and now, you there was nothing for me to get up to, and things like that. But yeah, all this stuff has happened to me. And I don't really know if I've ever thought of, I know that Sam is me and I am Sam,
Yeah.
but I've never really thought of the fact that this is it probably is part of my childhood of, and things that you would deal with that. Um, this is just a way to get some of those demons out, I guess you can
Yeah.
say, as, your childhood demons.
Yeah, that
But
makes
this
sense
is
to
probably
me.
my favorite. This is my favorite picture. You see that?
Yeah, that's really
So
good.
Sam wishes he could go somewhere else during the cold time. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I had to, that's one of my favorite pictures in the book because that's
'Cause-
kind of how I feel. And then when I went to Arizona, it was like, wow, like I don't have sad. I felt lighter. I literally felt lighter. I didn't feel the like push down, like almost like you're wearing a backpack that's too heavy. I I didn't feel that. And during the time when I was in Arizona, it was incredible. And then I came back, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about this.
So
So
what's because it must have been difficult as a child, because sometimes one of the things I think that people try to be helpful, and it's nice that people are showing that they care, but there's a dilemma then, because you actually just sometimes want to be left alone, and you're not trying to hurt anyone's feelings when you push them away. And
no,
sometimes it's a lot easier to be around people who are comfortable with you just ignoring them. And it must have been difficult as a child, because you're going through something and you're trying to process and understand that you just want to be left alone. But because you're a child, lots of people then want to interfere and tell you you should be all right.
yeah, that's kind of the weird thing with depression is you don't want to celebrate.
Yeah.
You don't want to celebrate. You don't want to be a part of, family gatherings, and you don't want to, and I talk about in that picture that with the where Sam has a Santa hat on. I talk about his dad calling him Moby Marvin. Don't be a Moby Marvin, and be, you need to be happy in times. And but during Christmas, I literally was a Moby Marvin. My siblings and my family knew. There was just like, oh, okay, Dan's just gonna kind of mope around and blah blah blah. And I forgot where it's going. But yeah, during Christmas time is when I noticed as a child, when it hit, I didn't want to be a part of any celebration. And that's why I push, during depression, you don't want to be around happy people, because you don't want to, let them feel bad, and you don't want to be part of their celebration, which is so weird. And that's part of like why you feel guilt during depression, because why am I feeling this way? And yet you're, guilt is just it, it's a very frustrating feeling.
Mm.
I have a friend of mine and we've gotten that argument of like, I said, guilt is a needless, it's needless. And when I'm going through, but it, it has a purpose, but for when you're depressed, it sure doesn't. It just is more, you know, you're guilty for you're guilty for lack of sleep, oversleeping. Well, that's not good. You're guilty for pushing your friends away. Well, that's not good. You're guilty for not, getting your homework done. Well, that's not good. You're guilty for possibly giving sloppy homework and not concentrating. Well, that's not good. And so that's where the negative thoughts remind you, just like, you aren't any good. You are horrible. And when I was going through COVID, and I literally didn't have a purpose. And I was like, fine, all right, this is the way it is. I don't care. I I everything was just the worst possible life at the time for me. And so it's like, I don't care. And all those negative thoughts, I wasn't able to fight them off. But doing the research to create this book, and getting them in some meditation, just all kinds of stuff that I researched on YouTube, or books or whatever. I've become a happier person, surprisingly, which I never thought in a million years that I would talk about meditation being powerful. But the meditation isn't, it's the guided meditation that I use, where the people talk to you, and then your mind is able to think clear thoughts. And I listen to it every night, and my thoughts have been better. And you want to go to sleep thinking good thoughts,
Yeah.
and that's what this meditation does. I fall asleep to whatever kinds of things. What I've been big on with is Mind Valley. I don't know if people have heard of
Yeah.
that.
I've heard of Mind Valley. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Vishen Lakhiani, he was the one who created it, and I can't get enough of that. And there was another person, I can't think of him right now, but he does the seven days and your life will change. And I apologize. I can see him right now, but I can't think of him. And he actually is. I
I'll,
believe he's British too.
I'll look him up
Um,
and see who it is.
yeah,
7 days and your life will change.
something to that effect. He also talks, I can make you rich. But he was a hypnotist first, so he
So,
hypnotizes you, and what you do is you count down the numbers from 200 to all the way to zero. And while you're doing that, your mind is concentrating on the numbers. And while that's happening, if you have, if you have your two
yeah,
headsets in,
Paul McKenna.
you hear him. Yeah, that's it. That's it. I really like him too. And he has, he bombards the mind with good thoughts, and one of them he talks about how like and it's near the end before you wake up, but he talks about a caterpillar, and the caterpillar does this and it crawls on the ground, but sooner or later it's going to become something and it becomes a butterfly. And then, like I said, sooner or later, all of a sudden he's like, okay, well, wake up. And you're thinking, okay, I'm powerful. I'm a butterfly. I'm no longer on the ground.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
hope I answered that.
yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. 'Cause I'm a qualified hypnotherapist, so and I used to record
Oh, cool.
I used to record guided meditations for people, and people don't realise there is a. I mean, there's a lot of NLP involved with that hypnosis and guided meditations, but it's really the power of your thoughts is it's a super weapon.
Yeah.
And people who kind of, I was about to say drift through life, and that sounds derogative because I don't mean it like that, but sometimes people can get themselves in positions like with SAD, and you can get really hung up in a mental state that can be really difficult to navigate.
Very true.
And something as powerful as a Paul McKenna hypnosis or the Mind Valley, it like you say, it gets you into a place before you fall asleep that when you wake up you're still in that place and you're like, wow,
Yep.
this is a big difference for me today because I've woken up in a different place. My mind is actually somewhere else, and
Yeah.
this is how I need to start the day, because some people just aren't like that. And if you're not like that, if you wake up and your day's your day and you just don't seem to take things on board, or things don't seem to weigh you down or hold on to you, because sometimes through life, the mood can feel like it's got you in a permanent headlock, and you're trying to
Oh, yeah.
you're trying to walk around and get things done, and it's like something's choking the life out of you, and it's just like it's a weight. And so I'm a massive proponent of these things, for people to find ways to wake up in a different state of mind, because it becomes, if you're disciplined enough to do it frequently, it can become a perpetual motion, and you'll always slowly be gravitating forwards, and that brings about a new you that you might not have met before.
Yeah. I am in the process of, learning about all these different people. One of the things, or, research and just getting myself better and happier. I looked at Tony Robbins, and one thing that Tony Robbins does is he jumps in a pool of ice
Yeah,
water as soon as he wakes up, and other people have done too. Um, and it's just shock to the system. So I had an experience like that. I didn't plan on jumping in a hot tub or something like that. Or I mean, not a hot tub, but so in Wisconsin, there's a annual the what is it? January 1st. One of the ways that we celebrate in Wisconsin is and it's on the news, big time celebrating. You jump into the cold waters of Lake Michigan. And when I came back, I actually did that. I jumped into the cold waters of Lake Michigan because I've wanted to my entire life when I was younger. We lived far away, and so it's like, oh, do you want to make the trek? No, we'll have to deal with traffic, blah blah blah. And when I came back to Wisconsin, I didn't live, I lived maybe 15 minutes less than that to get to the lake. And it was like, okay, let's do this. And I jumped in and I was so excited. Before I went in, I told my friends and they're like, you're like, it doesn't count unless your whole body's in. You got to be fully submerged or it
Yeah.
doesn't count. And of course, none of my friends got up to do this early in the morning and everything. But yeah, the water is super cold. I wish I remembered the temperature right now. Um, on some occasions when they've done this, they've actually had to break the ice for people to actually jump in. And there wasn't any ice that time, but it definitely was cold. I mean, you could definitely have a
Yeah. Yeah.
hypothermia. And I came out and I was so happy. I even when I was in the water, I knew I could go further if I wanted to, but I mean, it wouldn't make sense to keep swimming. But yeah, I dove in and head first. I just went hardcore in, and it was great. I came out so exhilarated, and surprisingly, there was a news camera there, and they saw what happened. They're like, why is this guy so happy? We gotta find out. And so I was interviewed and on the local news because of it. So it's kind of really cool about that. And that was a turning point for me. People don't really understand how that would be a turning point, but the way I see it is I had an accomplishment because I
Yeah.
hadn't, like you were talking about, you don't, when you're depressed, you just need a win. You just need a win.
You do.
And, I can scratch that off my list.
Yeah.
I jumped in the lake and I am, they call it the polar bear plunge. And I got a picture beforehand with a bunch of people actually dressed up in polar bears. I wish I had the picture, right? But yeah, I have a picture with all these guys, and I can say I did it. I mean, and it's so stupid because it's like you don't get a medal or anything. It's just something you did. But it's for me when I did it, I know what Tony Robbins felt. I know how it shocks the system to be in such cold immediately, and and at that point, I was filled with euphoria. Like I'd never done this before, and I was so excited. And I got my one win, and the win kind of pushed me to keep going, if that makes any sense. I mean, because like I said,
It does.
I had a really rough time with the. Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say it does make perfect sense. There's a reason that there is a large group of people that do cold plunges every day. It changes their mental
Yeah.
state and fires them up ready for the day ahead.
Mm-hmm.
It's very powerful. Sorry, you were going to carry on talking. I interrupted.
Oh, I don't remember what else to say. It just was like a sentence or two. You're good.
Yeah, well, because you were talking about it's important to get that win, and when there is that depression and you're in that place, that one win can elevate you through the next few days.
Very true. And that's kind of what you do, like the power of one more. Like you count the wins and you rely on those wins. You hold on to those wins and be like, and that's kind of what the past is like, look, I've accomplished everything I've ever thought. Everything, and there's no reason I can't fight this one off. You know, I as a special ed individual, when special ed came out, I was part of the very beginning of it. It came out or was announced in like 75, and I was I was young and I was just in school at that point, and so people didn't know what it was. uh People actually not only looked at the students kind of weird because what's going on, they actually looked at the teachers kind of weird, and they kind of got the same ostracization that the kids did. I like the stat. There's like you know there's information on that that you could research that they felt that way. Um, I forgot where I was going.
That's okay.
But yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say we've pretty much come to a time conclusion. So I was just going to hit you with one last completely random question that I just like to ask people for no reason.
Go for it.
Then it's just playful in the imagination. So imagine it's a magical world, a time machine, whatever helps you do it. And you can go to any place in time, anywhere you want. Where would you go? What car would you drive? And what would you be listening to on the radio?
Wow. I know that this is the way that my my niece considers death for when my my father, her, uncle passed away. She sees him in a nice Corvette, like a older Corvette
Yeah,
back in the 50s and things like that, riding with his dog and possibly some age within, college age to high school age. For me, I've never really thought about that. Um, I kind of enjoy what I'm dealing with. Uh, I don't know how much people ask, would you go back to the past? I didn't really have a good past, but then again, I did. I mean, I've had one of my very favorite jobs. I worked at a movie theater for 5 years, and I love that. And then my other job recently, or before when I was in Arizona, I worked as a ramper in the, actually in the sun. And so you can imagine there wasn't a bad day. I mean, it didn't matter. I could have a horrible day and it was great. Well, I know that when I was younger, I prayed to have a Ferrari Testarossa
nice.
because of Magnum PI.
I was just going to
And
ask, was it Magnum PI?
I didn't get it,
Yeah.
but I would love to have that. But I didn't drive stick at the time, so I didn't really, and that was
No,
so I'd
that's
probably
Magnum PI Ferrari Testarossa. That rocked.
yeah, I'd probably take that. DeLorean would be cool from Back to the Future. Um, probably would if you would ask me this as a kid, I probably would have said Knight Rider kit.
Yeah.
Uh, but I'm not really sure what age I would do that. What I would do, what time period I'd go to. Because I like my friends now, and I don't know if it was a visit.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a really tough question.
There's no rules. It's whatever comes to your mind. Whatever you like. But it could just be, a Ferrari Testarossa with the Magnum theme tune as you're just driving around, doing burnouts in a car park.
Well, I mean, then you got to say, I want to be in Hawaii during that. I mean, like that would,
Yeah.
I guess that would probably be it.
Perfect. What music would you listen to?
Uh, I don't know. Like I said, my favorite band is the Lightning Seeds.
Yeah.
Um, I also like Poison, which is kind of opposite. Uh, I don't know. Are you talking about like the group, or are we talking about a one song? Because that's even tougher.
It could be anything. It can be anything. I just like exploring it with people.
That's good. Hmm. I don't know. Probably the Beatles, maybe. Uh, Revolution, something kind of happy, something kind of like
Yeah.
energetic.
Perfect. That's a wonderful place to stop. Dan, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I wish you all the best with Sam.
I had such a pleasure. Can I possibly sign out the way I would sign a book for everybody if
Please
they
do.
had a book?
Yeah, please do.
I always sign it out. Sam and I wish you much happiness as you make your list of gratitude, which we didn't talk about, but making lists of gratitude is something that's really good for you. And Tony Robbins said that you can't be mad or angry or fearful when you have gratitude. It's the opposite. Your mind just can't do two things at once. So in this process of getting better for me, I've created a list of gratitude and daily. And that's the thing, like you gotta think about something good that happened each day. And my mom forced me, forced me to do that. And I talk about that in the book, is that I needed to do one thing with gratitude a day, but she would pick me up and I'd have to tell her one thing of gratitude. My friends tried to like say, hey, he did this, or I did this. And she's like, okay, now that's two, Dan. Wait, what? I didn't, what? So, and that was literally the hardest thing in the world, because I came out, I had to be every negative, 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 negative. She's like, give me one positive thing before you go negative. Okay. And I was able to do that. And then also in my research, I found that um, one of the things you can do with kids is, if you're with them in the car, when you hit stoplights, everybody list one thing you're thankful for.
That's good.
And yeah, yeah.
I like that.
So I'm so thankful I'm on this journey. I learned so much, and I've come more positive out of it. And like I said, even with the meditation, which in my mind, that's weird. People do that. What are we talking about? And then I did guided meditation. I can't get enough of it. But as they say in your country, cheers. It's been a pleasure.
It has. And yeah, cheers. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
And there you have it. That was Dan telling us his personal story, why he wrote the book, and yeah, how he learned to deal with it, and how insightful he was with the information he gave. And do please check out the links. There will be several links to different methods of people that have helped Dan over the years. And as always, wherever you are from, whatever you believe, please take care and be blessed. Thank you for listening.